Aloha everyone. My name is Andrew Choi. I'm the Acting Planning Program Manager. Before we get started, I'm just going to give a quick play to open this up. Please bow your heads. Dear Keokua, please bless the people on the call today. Please give us an open mind and open ears as we discuss these topics today. And please bless us with love and aloha and wisdom. In your name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Andrew. Did you want to say anything else to kick off the meeting?
No, just thank you everyone for taking the time to join DHHL today to discuss these second part of the first round of beneficiary consultation meetings for the update of the department's general plan. As you know, we talked about at our first meeting, the general plan update is meant to be a comprehensive policy document that will help to guide the department over the next 20 years. So thank you for taking the time to help us make a policy document that is reflective of beneficiary comments and sentiment. With that, I'd like to introduce our consultants that are helping us with the general plan update, SSFM International. With us today, we have Melissa May, who is the project manager of the project, and she will be facilitating today's discussion.
Thank you, Andrew. And nice to see you all. Thanks for joining us on a post-holiday Monday. We typically have a little bit smaller group during these Monday meetings or these daytime meetings, but it's another time we wanted to offer people, that may not be able to make it in the evening. So we're glad you're here, and we have a lot to cover today. So let's get started. So go ahead. As Andrew mentioned, I'm Melissa May. I've been working on this project with DHHL as the project manager and several other projects before this. So I'm really happy to be here, and I'm going to try to help us cover a lot of material today that's really important. This is our agenda. We have 2 hours, so we'll do a brief introduction. We'll get to know who's in the room, and then we'll give an overview of where we are in the process and what we've done to date. Then we're going to talk about the vision for 2040, and I see several of you were at our first round of meetings, so hopefully you'll be able to see what you heard and provided in the draft vision that we're going to present here today, and this is still a work in progress. Then we're going to be spending about the second half of the meeting talking about land and land use in particular, and we'll be doing some discussion around that, trying to get some detailed input from you guys. And then we'll wrap it up right around 1 o'clock today. So we'll do our best to keep on track. Next slide, please. So this is who we have here in the room today from the project team. So we have Andrew and Julie Cachola as well. And then Jared unfortunately can't join us today. He's in the field, but so I'm taking over as facilitator. And then we have Malachi Krishak and Matt Fernandez here. So they're all from the team, and we'll be helping facilitate our breakout group discussions. Next slide, please. So just a reminder, this is the second round, or the second part of the first round of beneficiary engagement of this project. So we did the first part in March, and it was just really a kickoff, starting to talk about the vision for 2040, and now we're here to present some findings on the draft vision and talk about land use. So that's really the purpose of today's meeting, and also just to remind everyone where we're at in the process. Next slide, please. So you're all familiar with this, and everybody's been wonderful so far, so I don't expect any issues, but we're just asking everyone in the meeting, including ourselves, be respectful of other participants, follow the typical Zoom etiquette of keeping yourself muted and keeping the chat to a minimum, just so as to be focused and not distracting. Show aloha, raise your hand, and wait for the facilitator to call on you if you have a question, or you can also type your question in the chat box. And of course, not everyone's going to agree on everything, so we need to agree to disagree and have an open mind to some new ideas, and we're definitely going to talk about some new ideas today. Next slide. So for those of you that may be new to Zoom, you can see this bar on the bottom of your screen, and there's a mute button on the bottom left. It looks like you've all found it, but make sure to unmute yourself if you're talking, and use the raise hand button, which is under the participants box, in order to raise your hand, and this will let us know that you have a question. You can also use the chat box to either type the word question or type your question so that we can call on you when we get to the discussion parts of the meeting. Next slide, please. So like the other meetings we've had, we're going to be using menti.com, and it might be easiest if you pick up your smartphone and do this with your phone, to go to menti.com on the browser, and you enter the code that's up there on the screen, and that will lead you through a series of questions. And we're going to start with a few basic questions about your name and your email, and those are confidential. It's just for our records of who attended the meeting. But it's also going to ask you where you're calling in from and some other questions about how you feel about things that are being presented today. So let's see if we can get you all up and running on this. So visit menti.com either on your phone or in another tab on your web browser, and see if you can type in that code. Matt also put it in the chat. Malachi, do we have any results coming in yet?
Not yet.
Okay. Let us know if you're having any issues.
Put the code back.
Okay, the code
you
is.
You can put them right here.
Yeah.
87080916. All right.
Okay, looks like we've got a couple of respondents, so let's see what we're saying here. So one of the questions asks if you're a lessee on the wait list, undivided interest, or other. So far, interestingly, we've had about half-half lessees and waitlist people in our meetings to date, with a few in the other categories. Let's see where everyone's calling in from. Oh, Florida, great. I guess these earlier meetings also help the mainland people participate. Waianae, Maui, Waimanalo. Cool. Thank you. All right, so, oh, Paneva, okay. Looks like we've got 5 responses. Anyone having any issues with the Menti? Looks like most of you have got it. Kapolei.
Yeah, you guys want to get involved now with the Mentimeter because it'll be used throughout the meeting. So you might just, and it'll go in the order of questions. So it would be best to get on, take the time to get on now.
Yes, thanks, Julie. All right, let's keep it moving. It's good to see we've got people from all over, and let's keep going. In the chat, you can always find the Menti code in the chat. So next slide, please. Okay. So where we are in the process. Okay, yeah. So this is Malachi. So go ahead, Malachi.
Okay, great. That's my cue. Thanks, Melissa. Hello, everyone. My name is Malachi.
Oh. Sorry.
I'm unmuted now. Okay, no worries. My name is Malachi. I'm a planner with SFM. So just to kick off this portion of the meeting, I'm just going to run through a little bit of background of where we are in the process, provide an overview of the general plan update process, and then share some initial results from that part 1 of round 1 of these meetings here. And then I'll move into the discussion about the vision statement that it's under development. So as you can see in this graphic, the general plan sets the policy direction for all of the DHHL's plans. as well as funding, legislative, and land use priorities. At the bottom here, you can see we're also working on an evaluation program as part of this update, which is intended to monitor success of the plan policies over the lifetime of the plan. And really, this general plan is an overarching document that guides the department over the next 20 years. So looking at that time frame, you can see it's an important opportunity for everyone here to get to be involved in the process, since this opportunity only comes around every 20 years or so and really influences the overall planning system of the department. So really happy that you folks are here today, and happy to see some folks returning to have more opportunity to share your manao. So where we are in the process, this slide shows an overview of the project timeline, and you can see that it's approximately a 2-year process, which began in 2020, where our project team did some stakeholder interviews with staff, former chairs, along with some research and analysis of existing policy issues related to the department and the last general plan, which was about 18 years ago. And then moving into this year, 2021, you can see we're currently in our first round of statewide beneficiary consultation. This is our second part. So we had 3 meetings in March. We have 3 more focusing on new topics in April. And we also have an online open house, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. And then we're hoping at the end of this year, we'll be coming back for the second round of consultation to share and review the draft plan with you folks. And we also have 2 Hawaiian Homes Commission presentations anticipated, one prior to the draft plan, and then one prior to the final general plan, which we hope to get in the summer of 2022. So still pretty early in the process, so there's plenty of opportunities for you folks to be engaged. So as I mentioned, we're currently in the middle of that first round of engagement, which we've broken down to 2 parts. So part 1 was in early March and included the launch of the project website. There's a project fact sheet available. I'm just kind of overviewing the overall plan process. You also have received mailouts announcing the general plan update process and these round 1 meetings. And as I mentioned, we launched an online open house, which Matt will post the link to in the chat, and you can check out if you haven't already. But there's opportunities to provide your comments and input through the online open house, which is open until the end of this month for this first round of update material. I also want to mention that the round 1 meeting, so the ones we had in March, the recordings are also available if you missed it. So you can view the recordings of those meetings on the DHHL YouTube website. It's also being rebroadcast on each of the island's public access TV stations. So like Olelo here on Oahu. I would encourage you to look at the local listings for those times. They've airing at various times throughout the day, but you have to check the listings, since I think they schedule the programming week by week sometimes. So, and then these ones will also be available in the same channels once we complete this second part. So the part 1 virtual meetings kicked off the first round of engagement. As I mentioned, they included the 3 meetings, and the 3 meetings all covered the same materials and had these 3 goals to introduce the project and the team. We wanted to gather input from on a statewide vision for 2040, which we'll share the results of in the next section. And then it's also wanted to provide a report on progress from the current existing general plan, 2002, and discuss those goals, which ones you folks feel are important to bring forward in this new update process. So in total, the meetings, in those 3 meetings, we had 155 people attend. During those meetings, we also use Mentimeter, and you can see that not everyone is able to use it. So 107 people were able to use Mentimeter and provide their input that way. We also had 131 people who provided their input and visited the online open house so far. just to provide a little bit more information on who attended the first round one, part one meetings in March. On the left, you can see we have a word cloud here. It's kind of like how we had in Mentimeter. The larger the text indicates the more people with that response. So you can see the groups that were kind of most represented in that first round. We have Maui, Kapolei, Hilo, Waianae. We also have people, I think there's like a Germany in here. So people from all over, Arizona. So we had a pretty good mix. And then the right-hand side is a pie chart showing a breakdown of who attended and they shared their status of as lessee, waitlist, etc. This is just through Mentimeter, so we don't have, it's not from everyone who attended, but you can see, as Melissa mentioned, we actually had 48 people responded there on the waitlist, 41 responded there lessees, 4 undivided interest with leases yet to convert. So it's a pretty good mix, and it looks like we have a nice mix here again. And then lastly, just wanted to share from that part one meeting, as I mentioned, one of the things we asked folks for feedback on is how important each of the existing goals is to them moving forward with this update process. So the general plan, the 2002 general plan includes 21 overall goals. And we actually walked through each of those goals with everyone who attended those meetings. And we asked folks to rank them on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being less important, 5 being extremely important to bring forward in this update process. And these are the results from that exercise. Overall, actually, everything was pretty much important. So on that 1 to 5 scale, everything was basically kind of like a high 3 to 4 and higher. So people thought it was very important to bring these goals, but along with us as we work on this update. But these 5 are the ones that scored the highest in terms of the weighted average. So I just wanted to share these with you. The first one was utilize Hawaiian homeland uses for uses most appropriate to meet the needs and desires of the beneficiary population. That was the highest ranking one. Substantially increase the number of residential homesteads awarded each year. That one was another important one, the second highest. Increase the potential for beneficiaries to qualify for residential housing financing was the third. The last 2 related to water. Provide access to quality water in the most cost-effective and efficient manner, and aggressively exercise to protect Hawaiian homeland water rights. So those ones were the top 5, but again, if you haven't had a chance to look at the 2002 general plan, it's a pretty short document. It just kind of runs through these goals, and as we ran through them, folks believe that those things are still very relevant in this update process. So encourage you to take a look on that on the Open House website as well, if you haven't already. So just, I guess, any questions about that first round of feedback before I jump into the next section? Okay, right on. So I'm just going to continue on with the other piece of feedback that we're looking for in that part 1 of meetings, which is related to the vision for 2040. So this section will recap what we heard in that part 1 and through the online open house and through other feedback like emails we got from beneficiaries, and provide you folks with a draft vision statement that we've come up with as a project team from all that information we got from you folks. So as a reminder, the 2002 general plan did not include a vision statement. So we're faced with the opportunity to define kind of what this future looks like in 2040. The last plan did include a mission statement, but the difference between a mission statement and vision statement is that a vision statement will describe future destination, is how we like to put it, for where we want to be in 2040. And so really that description is basically defining what success looks like for us in 2040. So from the input we received to date, we identified an overarching vision theme of self-sufficiency. You can see at the top of this graphic here, self-sufficiency is kind of the overarching theme. And within that, within that theme, there are 3 general vision elements that came up and we're focusing on. These division elements are connecting beneficiaries to land, healthy and sustaining beneficiaries, and sufficient funding and resources. So together, these encompass the vision elements, and you know, kind of more simplified, they kind of address land, people, and resources, and allow us to start thinking about how we can connect these values to actions under each of these vision elements. So that's a little, I'll look at each of these a little bit more closely with all of you folks in these next few slides. So self-sufficiency was the #1 kind of word and theme that of all the input that we received on the vision so far. It's also part of the department's existing mission statement, which is presented in the last general plan. So what we heard from you folks in that first round really validated kind of self-sufficiency as a critical part of the vision. So we view it as an overarching theme that applies to all parts of the trust, right? The lands, the beneficiaries, the department. So you can see this list on the slide summarizes what we heard in that first round from beneficiaries. And again, we had the meetings, but people also sent in some emails. We had the online open house. So we're including some direct quotes in these text bubbles here that you can read. But some of the key ideas that we heard so far were working together. So the DHL, the Hawaiian Homes Commission, we'll work together with beneficiaries to collectively build self-sufficiency, and really through an improved relationship. And again, this is the vision of what we would like to see in 2040. These are statements in that light. So feeding ourselves is another idea in our community, in the sense of opportunities for food security was brought up as an important vision for the future. Another one is economic development plans and opportunities for homestead communities to be self-sufficient, and then contributing to sustainability and food security for all of Hawaii to see as an example of how to do it right is another vision element that we heard. Oops, sorry, I went backwards. I'm going forward now. So jumping into, that was the overarching theme again, self-sufficiency. So going into the vision elements, the first vision element is connecting beneficiaries to land. And this includes addressing the wait list to get more beneficiaries on the land. And part of that means providing a broader mix of housing opportunities and options. And then placing beneficiaries on the land also means more than just having a home. It's about building strong communities, resilient communities that are connected to the land and that kuleana. And then in return, right, we'll be taking care of the land if that relationship is strengthened. This goes back to promoting, this came up as well, and encouraging more traditional relationships with the land related to self-sufficiency again. And then finally, placing beneficiaries on the land to help foster a sense of stewardship for the Aina and resources so that the Aina can return us to a place that nurtures communities and future generations. So that's the last kind of piece we heard with connecting beneficiaries to the land. That's vision element 1. Vision element 2 is having healthy and sustaining beneficiaries. So this vision described as a relationship where beneficiaries are empowered and all parties of the trust are working together toward a shared vision. And communication between the Hawaiian Homes Commission, department, and beneficiaries is regular, accessible, transparent. So communication is a big word that came up as well. There are also more programs that help all the community needs in the future. And another word that came up often is empowerment. So the beneficiaries are empowered through advocacy and have more of a voice in leadership and direction for the shared vision. Something that I think we heard in the meetings was like being in the driver's seat. So choosing leadership for the department and for the trust. The beneficiaries envision a future that fosters support and supports traditional Hawaiian lifestyles in addition to education around Hawaiian values and culture, but also for DHL staff and commissioners This relates to not just the beneficiaries, but DHHL staff and commissioners. That's one of the visions. Also, being less tied to debt to experience more financial independence. And again, this leads to more empowerment, that word empowerment, of having more choices on how people can get onto the land, how the beneficiaries are able to get onto the land. And then lastly, the blood quantum issues are addressed along with succession and the future legacy and passing that on to future generations. And then the last vision element, the third vision element, involves securing sufficient funding and resources. So it involves ensuring sufficient funding for the department, but also includes better use of revenues for beneficiary programs, excuse me, and securing department and the rights of to resources, like important resources such as water. So not just money, but also important resources to help sustain us and build self-sufficiency. This also includes having the right infrastructure in place for communities to succeed, to sustain, and to thrive, and includes protecting the existing lands of the trust for the proper uses, and acquiring new lands and fulfillment of outstanding debts is the last one. Oh, sorry, one more. The bottom one's really important. And this was something that's kind of carried over from the last general plan, which is leveraging partnerships with other Hawaiian serving organizations to support Hawaiians and beneficiaries of the trust. So this word cloud, again, we're showing another word cloud, actually takes the words that we've heard and we put in a word cloud so we could help identify kind of what the ingredients most important for success in terms of achieving the vision are. So to create new conditions, we need to adapt and improve upon the relationship of these ingredients that kind of came up. So you can see words like people, funding, resources. We also have like vision, kuleana, legacy. So these are the different ingredients that have relationships to one another, and these are kind of what the relationships between these, if they're strengthened, feel that can kind of push us towards success, towards achieving the vision for 2040. And then this next one is about principles for success, taken from your words again, the beneficiary words in the first round. And these principles will help guide the actions that must be taken in order to achieve the vision. So some of the things to highlight here are, we see communication right in the middle, stewardship, transparency, place, ohana, and land. So having these principles to kind of ground us in terms of our actions is an important piece as well. Well, I see a comment here from Laverne. So related to the vision elements, it looks like, I believe that economic plus social sustainability is self-sufficiency. That's great, because I think self-sufficiency comes up a lot. And that's something that we hope to get out of this process too, with the vision statement, is maybe coming up with kind of what self-sufficiency means in a more clear way. So that's a great comment. Thank you. Okay. So as I mentioned, all those elements, the overarching theme and the elements and the words from those word clouds, from all of those pieces, our project team took a crack at coming up with a draft statement incorporating these different elements and pieces to share with you folks today, and to really get your feedback on as a first draft, so we can start refining it and incorporate it in our planning process for developing the policies related to this plan. So I'm just going to read through it, and then after this, we'll have a chance to kind of walk through each of the elements, which again are connecting the beneficiaries to land, healthy and sustaining beneficiaries, and then sufficient funding and resources. And we'd love to get your feedback on how well you feel this draft vision statement captures where you're at. Okay, so here it is. In the year 2040, we envision a Hawaiian Homelands Trust, Department of Hawaiian Homelands, and beneficiaries who are thriving, self-sufficient, and connected to one another and the Aina. Trust lands are nurturing and sustaining family homesteads, agricultural, pastoral, and other sustainable commercial activities, and active partnerships are in place to responsibly steward the natural and cultural resources. Beneficiaries are thriving on the land after receiving leases and are engaged in activities that strengthen and empower their communities. Education, resources, and technical support are available to promote greater economic opportunity, choice, and control. And beneficiary communities are places of healing, connection, and cultural grounding, which are cared for and passed on from kupuna to mo'opuna. DHHL has adequate resources to support the continued advancement of Native Hawaiians through connection to and care for the land. Communication with beneficiaries is transparent and collaborative, and the actions and decisions of the department are grounded in aloha and Hawaiian values. All of Hawaii benefits from the leadership of beneficiary communities through their connections to the land and care for their communities, which inspire and contribute to sustainability and resilience across the islands. So that is the draft vision statement. I guess I'll let it soak in. It's a lot of words, but we wanted to break it down into those themes that really came up in the process. So as I mentioned, we're going to go through this again. We're going to kind of go through piece by piece. We're going to use the Zoom polling feature. We're not using Mentimeter for this part, but this will just pop up on your screen actually. So if you're on your web browser on your laptop or computer, on the left-hand side, this will pop up on your screen. And you can actually move it around if it's blocking text. You can move it around out of the way. But if you're joining from your phone or the app on your phone, the right-hand side, when we launch the polls, the right-hand side, it'll look like this one first. But if you want to view the slide that we're showing, you can press close. And you'll be able to see the slide, but if you want to see the poll again, you'll have to look for this green text on the very top of your screen, and you tap on that and it'll take you back to the poll. So any questions about that? Oh, I see, keep the vision statement on screen. Yeah, so for this next part, we're going to go through the vision statement again, actually piece by piece, if that's okay. So we'll have the text back up again. And then on the poll, it's going to ask you kind of 3 questions. Does this vision element resonate with you? We're going to say yes, you can say no, or you can say, maybe if you're not sure, you can say, I want to take a closer look on the open house. And this vision statement for folks to read and marinate on is also going to be on the open house, as you mentioned. Okay, so let's get back to the vision statement. And I'm going to launch the poll for this first element. And we'll read through it piece by piece and get your folks' feedback. Okay. So vision element 1, connecting beneficiaries to land. So kind of the opening statement is, in year 2040, we envision Hawaiian Homelands Trust, Department of Hawaiian Homelands, and beneficiaries who are thriving, self-sufficient, and connected to one another. But this first piece, connecting beneficiaries to land. Trust lands are nurturing and sustaining family homesteads, agricultural, pastoral, and other sustainable commercial activities, and active partnerships are in place to responsibly steward the natural and cultural resources. So let's see. We'll give about a minute or so for folks to respond. I can see who's responded so far, so I'll wait till we have the majority of everyone. Just gotta make sure how many people are on our project team. I think we got 13 responses so far. give about 20 more seconds. Okay, looks like we got everyone in. So I'm going to end the polling and I'll share the results. So this one seems to resonate with most folks. Some people said they're not sure and want to take a closer look at the open house. I see Melissa posted the draft vision, and then I see a comment here as well. So I'll read this out. I would not limit the uses to the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act categories. That's a great comment, and I'm glad you're here for this meeting because this meeting focuses on land use in the next section. So really excited to hear your ideas related to that. Thanks, Daniel. Anyone else have any comments on this one? Thoughts they want to share before we jump into the next vision element? All right, let's do it. Okay, so I'm kind of balancing both the slides and the poll. Okay, vision element 2, healthy and sustaining beneficiaries. Let's launch the poll. So this one, beneficiaries are thriving on the land after receiving leases and are engaged in activities that strengthen and empower their communities. Education, resources, and technical support are available to promote greater economic opportunity, choice, and control. And beneficiary communities are places of healing, connection, cultural grounding, which are cared for and passed on from kupuna to mo'opuna. So you can respond to the poll. And if anyone's having technical difficulties related to the poll, don't be shy, let us know. We want to get as much participation from you folks as we can. Figure it out. Okay, looks like we got about 40% of you. Okay, give about 10 more seconds. Okay, last call. Okay, I will close this poll. Oh, we have one more came in. Okay, great, glad you got it in. And we'll share our results. So for this one, pretty similar. A few more people than the last one want to take a closer look. So we're seeing this one's related to connecting healthy and sustaining beneficiaries. So we had 69% of you said yes. We had no one said it didn't resonate with them. It's good to hear. And then 5 of you folks said want to take a closer look. Anyone else have comments on this one or thoughts they wanted to share? All right, not seeing anything in the chat or any hands. Okay, let's go to the next one. Okay. So vision element 3, sufficient funding and resources. I'll launch the poll and then I'll read it off. So for this one, in this part of the vision, the DHHL has adequate resources to support the continued advancement of Native Hawaiians through connection to and care for the land. Communication with beneficiaries is transparent and collaborative. The actions and decisions of the department are grounded in aloha and Hawaiian values. And getting feedback on these vision elements in terms of how they resonate is important too, because not just how it's stated in the vision statement, but kind of these ideas will help to organize the policies and priorities in the plan too. So looking at the big picture of these elements as well. Okay, I'm seeing some comments too we can go through after this poll. Okay, about 10 more seconds for this one, then I'll share, and then we'll go through some of the comments we heard. And if anyone wants to raise their hand and unmute themselves, feel free. Okay, let's end this poll and share our results. So this one's a little different from the last two. We have about half of you of the respondents who took the poll said, yes, this one does resonate. We had one person say no. And then a little less than half said, not sure, I want to take a closer look. So this one is an interesting one. It looks like we got some comments coming in. So let's see, let's check out the chat. On this one, before we move on, in regards to the beneficiary vision, need to place either some accountability onto the department or give beneficiaries more control. Oftentimes this idea of sustainability is placed on the beneficiary with no direction or with no direct support from DHHL. That is a great comment. I think that we heard some of that in the first round. So I think if you feel that this vision statement doesn't reflect that strong enough, I think maybe that's something that we can take into account with this draft as feedback, yeah. And definitely something I think that policies want to focus on too. We also have one that says, it appears a lot of mission and vision statement are about a wonderful wish list. We need to work on making that idea a reality. 100% agree. And I think this is hopefully this general plan is an opportunity to move towards more kind of reality or I guess implementation to frame that. I don't know if you want to speak on that a little bit more, Uncle, but feel free to jump in if you do.
Yes, Malachi. This is Pat Kahawaioa. And the only reason I made this statement is just that we have a limited amount of time going through this process that you're using. That is asking for beneficiary input into what we hope to see, or anyway, my grandchildren will see in the future. I'm at an age where if I can live 40 years, that's too long. I don't can handle that. So it is important that what we do now in these consultations, that our people, make realistic, get those realistic values down, and then it is incumbent on us as the beneficiaries, whether you have a lease or not, but if you're on the wait list, we just need to get to the legislatures, the legislators, and have the implementation of our vision, not as someone come about with their own vision of how we should, these lands should be, or the use of the lands, the general plan. So that's my reason for doing it, and moving forward, we may need to get a little bit more
specific.
For
Sounds
real.
like, yeah. I hear you. Thanks for that comment, Uncle. See if you have some couple other things before we move into it. I think hopefully in the next section with the land use, it's a chance to kind of get a little more specific in terms of actionable items too. Let's see. We should say that the resources come from the state legislature. Let's be more specific there. I hear that. Okay. Question: adequate resources. That is sounds like a question similar to adequate funding, right? That's I've been through that discussion, so in this vision, hopefully that can be addressed. County property tax revenues too. I don't know if someone can speak to possibility of that. I'm not sure the legal backing or rules for that. Sounds like I'd like to know where the resources are coming from. So we had those two, I think the two ideas for resources coming from state legislature, maybe from county property taxes. We also remember the vision, so anything's possible. So I don't know if anyone has anything else they want to share related to the resources. It sounds like there's some questions or ideas people had. It's time we can open it up for discussion on that a little bit if you want. Good? Okay. There's actually one more poll we're going to ask related to just the overall theme of self-sufficiency. And we already had one of the comments kind of on what self-sufficiency means. But let me launch that last poll to see if that last vision element resonates with folks. So this overall vision element of self-sufficiency, right? Beneficiary, the trust, Department of Hawaiian Homeland, the beneficiaries are thriving, self-sufficient, and connected to one another. But then we also had this other element at the end here, that this overarching theme, all of Hawaii will benefit from the leadership of beneficiary communities through their connections to the land, care for their communities, which will then inspire and contribute to sustainability and resilience across the islands. So you can share your what you think on the poll. If you have other thoughts, feel free to throw them in the chat. Raise your hand. It looks like we're about halfway. Half of everyone has voted so far. I have one comment. Someone said they feel this last one sounds like political rhetoric. Okay, we'll wait about 10 more seconds since we have, it's like we're waiting for about 5 more people to respond. Okay, we'll do 5, countdown 5, 4, 3. Oh, someone's not seeing. If you're on your phone and the voting options are on your screen, if you click on the top of the screen, it should say it should be green text, something related to the poll. If you tap on that, the poll will pop up again. If you're on your computer, you can go to the bottom bar and the poll, there should be a poll option. So you can see it. If not, you can enter you can private chat your response to us and we can count those in the final results. But it looks like we have, okay, yeah, we got about 75% now. I'll just end it and then we can share the results and then we can have a discussion if anyone has comments or questions they want to share. So let's share the results here. So this one, most people want to take a closer look at this one on the open house. We have one person who this one doesn't resonate with, and then 5 folks said this resonates with them. We had that one comment. Oh, here we have another one from Uncle Patrick. Some of these ideas may have legal consequences that we may move to other areas. For one, use county property tax as a resource. My question would be that we need the commission to ask if paying a of property taxes to the county is legal. I don't I definitely can't answer that one, but I think that's a great comment and a good question. To ask when we come up with, we have to go through all, as we come up with ideas, there is a vetting process in terms of what's possible, for sure. Okay, any other comments or questions? Let's see.
What are some other reasons why people want to take a closer look? I think that's interesting on the overall theme.
That's a good question, Julie.
Well, if no comments, then
but I do see one comment. This is from Kainoa. This one is not related to your comment, but it says to give preference to beneficiaries and beneficiary organizations, homestead associations, in awarding contracts and land use permits to develop and maintain homelands, and codify these processes to promote clarity and consistency and to be a streamlined process in the DHHL. That's a good comment to segue us into the next portion of the presentation, actually, if no one else has other comments.
I may have had one. I'm not sure, because I heard Julie's comments, and
please share.
Yeah, and so I just, if again, Julie, maybe your question to my question, could your train of thought,
No, I just think the result was interesting. That people wanted to take a deeper dive on it, and I was just wondering what was on people's minds.
Okay, I'm sorry, Julie, but yes, to me, the reason why a deeper dive is necessary, only because we're looking at a vision and a mission, 20 years down the road.
Yes.
And the some of the issues that were raised or are continually being raised are 20 and 40 years before us.
Okay.
So I that's the only reason. I just want to keep it fresh in people's mind that if we do have this is probably the best program in the world for Native Hawaiians who qualify to have the opportunity to live on Prince Cohil's legacy land. However, we are going to be settled with years. We have years prior and now years after where we're trying to correct the same thing. And seems like everybody, in this case, territory, federal, territory, and state, is ducking the answers. So we need to get to those answers. And I think then we will, as a Lahui, survive in however way we need to move forward. Thank you. But that's my comment, Julie.
Do you think we need to be more specific then, if we're asking the same kind of general questions, that we should drill down, specifically on what we're talking about when we talk about self-sufficiency, for example?
Absolutely. Absolutely, because one of the words, or the word that I'm missing in all this vision for the for the Hawaiian Home Commission Act and the people that live on the land, the word that I am missing, that I thought was the linchpin, the organic thing that Cohil thought about, was the rehabilitation. And we've done lost rehabilitation, and now we've gone into somewhere else. I think all commendable things to do and to have a vision for and work towards. But if we can't get rehabilitation, because rehabilitation has a lot of moving parts, and in that moving part of it is a sustainability. So I just want our people not lose the focus on these opportunities we have to make comments. Is that we need to go back, look at those things. Rehabilitation was the linchpin. That's what made Kuhil bother him in Naao when he looked at the people.
Good point.
Was that they were being dispossessed, disenfranchised, all of those, every word you like use. So I just need to make sure all people understand when we go, as we continue this process. Thank you.
Hello.
Thanks, Uncle. Okay, looks like we have a couple of comments that came in the chat as well. Let's see. All of Hawaii DHHL beneficiaries and waitlist people should be at the greater concern. So that last one, that's kind of related to that last piece of like all of Hawaii will benefit. Okay, Daniel, let's not use the program as a metric to determine if paying for DHHL needs is only justified if everyone benefits. Okay, again, related to that last piece of Hawaii, the program is race-based program that is a result of past injustice. Of course, the Native Hawaiians may benefit while the rest of the state may not.
Totally agree.
Yeah, that's a great point. Okay, we have someone home.
I think that's anti-home.
Anti-home, okay, sorry. Oh yeah, you're from the first meeting, apologies. Anti-home, you can go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, hi Uncle Pat, it's nice to hear you. And you said something that resonated with me earlier, and it has to do with the legislature. I don't think that the vision and the mission 20 years ago has drastically changed from today. I believe the main focus is to get our people on the land, and that has been the ultimate focus in the last 100 years. Unfortunately, I agree with Uncle that we are not a priority at the legislature. We have not been a priority, albeit when the Constitution was changed back in 1978 from the legislature may provide sufficient funds to shall provide sufficient funds. 42 years later, we are still waiting for those sufficient funds. So when we talk about how our 28,000 applicants are depending on the Department of Hawaiian Homelands to provide them the land so that they can get a lease to do what our prince intended for all of us to do. The department has been dependent on the legislature. And quite frankly, I feel that the legislature, the State Department, the state government and the federal government has failed our people. And I don't know how we're going to fix that, but that's something that we seriously need to consider. Thank you.
Thank you, Anti-Home.
Thank you, Anti-Home. Okay, we're getting these down. Anyone else have any comments, ideas, reflections you want to share from that last exercise?
Just my general reflection is that it seems like the last two parts of the vision statement we're going to have to revisit and relook at. I think it's consistent with what we heard in the meeting we had on Thursday evening from those that participated in that, is that the last two parts of the vision statement we're going to have to take another look at. And hopefully the people who indicated that they want to take a closer look at it in the open house, hopefully you folks can participate in the open house and give us more mana'o regarding those last two parts of the vision statement. It will help us make it better if you are willing to take the time and share your mana'o with us. So thank you.
Mahalo, Andrew. And mahalo everyone for sharing. It's really important thoughts and a lot of really great points. So I can see a lot of people in the chat also agreeing with all the folks you spoke to. So with that, we're gonna move on. And again, I see Matt just posted the link to the open house again. So if you can visit that. But this ends my portion. I'm gonna pass it on to Melissa, and she'll keep us moving. There'll be more opportunities to share as well.
Thank you. All right, so this is kind of the pivot to the big topic for today, the connecting land and people, where we start talking about land use in the plan. So the vision, you know, sets the big picture where we're headed, and now we're rolling up our sleeves and getting into policy aspects of the plan. So let's go to the next slide. So, you know, this is a big topic, land use, and just to frame it a little bit, we'll start with some of the things we've heard already in our initial discussions with beneficiaries. This kind of tells us how beneficiaries are thinking about land use. You know, we're hearing that land use should support traditional cultural uses, ideas about land and ways of living, that it should have the values of stewarding and malama of the Aina, self-sufficient communities, different types of housing, support for all kinds of farming, making sure there's economic opportunity for beneficiaries on trust lands. And we've also heard you know, some discussion about contributing to Hawaii's sustainability and food security. Next slide. So here's just a little background on DHHL's thoughts about land use and how it fits into their program. And it's really central, as you guys have said already, you know, the central part of the program is to enable Native Hawaiians to return to their lands. And this is in order to fully support self-sufficiency for Native Hawaiians. The Hawaiian Homes Commission, this is really important, has authority to set its own land use designations apart from county zoning and state land use. You know, it should be noted that there is still some requirements that have to be complied with for county, you know, developments and infrastructure. So that's something to keep in mind. But DHHL really has an ability to do something different with their land use designations, and that's the conversation we're starting today. So DHHL's really, their main role is to determine how best to utilize the lands for the betterment of beneficiaries. And right now they base decisions about land use on beneficiary input. They look at the suitability of the land for different kinds of uses. And they also look at land use planning best practices, which you can see you know, how the island plans apply these things, and the regional plans as well. So really the current model that DHHL uses to use land to better beneficiaries is through, firstly, building homes and awarding lots, and then secondarily generating revenue through land disposition. So the intent is that revenue, you know, goes back into the trust to help fulfill its mission of returning Hawaiians to the land. So this general plan is a big deal because it's an opportunity to revisit and redefine how DHHL thinks about land use. And we definitely need your mana'o and to hear what you think about how we could shift that going forward. Next slide, please. So if you were at the first round of meetings, you saw this slide. There are some requirements that were adopted in the Hawaii Administrative Rules that this general plan has to follow that did not apply to the last general plan. So there's 8 specific requirements, and 6 of these directly relate to land use. The first one is to establish a uniform system of land use designations that is used across all the island plans. The second is to establish relationships between these land use designations and how how the land dispositions are provided, so how land is awarded. And then the next 4 are all about establishing criteria, so how the department determines which lands should be used for homesteading, not used for homesteading within the next 20 years, lands for revenue generation, and lands for community use, as well as policies about management of those lands. So that's really what we're starting to gather input on today. The things we're discussing today are going to help guide the department's approach to meeting these different criteria from the rules. Next slide, please. And just looking back at the 2002 general plan, there were a handful of goals about land use planning, and they're listed here. So they're utilizing Hawaiian homelands for uses most appropriate to meet the needs and desires of the beneficiary population. And if you recall from Malachi's presentation, this was the most highly ranked of all the general plan goals in terms of importance by the beneficiaries. So this is an important one. Another goal is to encourage a balanced pattern of growth into urban and rural growth centers, and then to just develop livable, sustainable communities that provide space for or access to amenities to serve the daily needs of residents. Next slide. So here's a snapshot of DHHL land to provide a basis for this conversation. You can see the table on the left. This is the lands and land use designations that DHHL uses today as of 2018. There's a little over 200,000 acres of land in DHHL's statewide land holdings, and there's about 10 different designations that are used, which are listed here. And some of them are homestead designations and some are non-homestead. So you can see the breakdown in the yellow table that about 35% of the acres are within homestead designations, and that includes pastoral, supplemental agricultural, subsistence ag, and residential. Those are the main homesteading uses. And then the others are non-homestead, which means that they can be leased or awarded in other ways. So the pie chart on the right shows the breakdown in terms of how much land is within these different types of designations. And you can see residential is just 5% of the total land area. In part, that's because the residential plots are smaller than ag and pastoral. Agriculture, homesteads, including subsistence and supplemental, are about 8%. Pastoral is about 21%. Conservation and special district are collectively about 30%, and general agriculture is about 30%, and commercial industrial are 1%, as well as community use. And I'm gonna, in the next set of slides, I'll go into more detail about what each of these designations mean. But just as something to keep in mind, these relative ratios of the current land holdings. Next slide, please. So, okay, let's start with residential. And, this is key to DHHL's waitlist and mission of putting Hawaiians on the land. And these are typically residential subdivisions built to county standards in areas close to existing infrastructure. And these are usually an acre or less in size, depending on where they're at. And they typically come with infrastructure, including potable water, all utilities, road access, and it's all typically done to county standards so that it can be dedicated and maintained by the county after the awards happen. And recently, in 2019, the lease offerings for residential were expanded to include different kinds of housing, including multifamily rentals and kupuna housing, as well as supplemental dwelling units. So that provides a little bit more choice. And there were a handful of goals in the 2002 general plan related to residential. So obviously they want to increase the number of residential homesteads awarded, provide a mix of housing opportunities, provide homesteads financing and housing opportunities to those most in need. They want residential communities to be reflective of the diverse socioeconomic profiles of the Native Hawaiian community. And another important one is to ensure that existing homesteads are maintained as healthy and attractive communities, and to increase beneficiaries' ability to qualify for financing. Next slide, please. So subsistence agriculture is another type of homestead designation. It was recently introduced in 2017, and it kind of intended to fill a puka that people wanted to see, the ability to have smaller lot agriculture where people could grow things for their personal consumption or small market use. And so these are basically large lot, well, in a way, small lot agriculture. You can put a house on them, but you're not required to, and you don't need to have a farm plan for these lots. So lot sizes are usually 5 acres or less, and infrastructure can be more minimal than would be provided in a residential subdivision. But these are still areas that are relatively close to existing infrastructure. Next slide, please. So supplemental agriculture is large lot agriculture. So this is more production oriented for people that want to farm in a commercial way. Lot sizes are typical 40 acres or less, and infrastructure is basically just access to water and roads, which may be paved or not. Next slide. Pastoral. So if you recall, this was about 20% of current land holdings, and so this is large lot, about 1,000 acres or less, more for pastoral uses, and people need to have a ranch plan and fencing, and they need to be on the pastoral waiting list, and there's currently not using this designation on Oahu. And again, minimal infrastructure. So 22 goals related to ag and pastoral. They want to increase the number of leases awarded, provide infrastructure, technical assistance, and financial support to help people, beneficiaries using these awards, provide commercial leasing opportunities of these types for beneficiaries, and use the most productive agriculture lands for intensive agriculture and pastoral use. Next slide, please. Okay, so we've just covered the main homestead designations, and now we're going to be talking about the non-homestead designations. So general agriculture, and this is kind of a, in some ways, a catch-all designation. It's lands that are held as an interim use until opportunities for higher and best uses become available, but they can be used for intensive or extensive farming or ranching, or just kind of held in reserve until they're going to be developed. Next slide, please. So community use is another designation, and this is used for facilities and shared spaces that the community can use, like parks, cultural centers, economic development areas, utilities, and public facilities. And the general plan has a goal to provide economic opportunities for beneficiaries, and that can happen in these types of areas. Next slide, please. So commercial and industrial, this is 1% of DHHL's land holdings, and that's consistent with their general policy of keeping it at 1%. So commercial lands are used for retail, business, commercial. Industrial are used for more manufacturing, processing, construction, wholesale, and other types of activities like that. And the infrastructure really depends on the use. And the purpose of these lands is to generate revenue to provide financial support toward the trust mission. Next slide, please. And then finally, special district and conservation. So you saw that these are quite a bit of DHHL's current land holdings. They're about 15% each. And you know, these are really interesting categories because while they acknowledge the environmental functions of some of these areas, and they also acknowledge that there are some things on the lands in Hawaii that that can't be developed or used for housing. So you know, that may be because there are areas that are subject to hazards. They might be areas that people want to preserve for open space or view planes, areas with cultural resources or spiritual significance, areas that might not be practical or economical to develop because they're so far away, and areas that people want to reserve for greenways. And that's kind of special district kind of encompasses areas that just might need a little bit more attention in order to determine their best use for beneficiary enhancement. And then conservation lands are more areas that, you know, just require protection in their own right because of their environmental significance or ecological function. So like watersheds to protect drinking water, places where there's endangered species or critical habitat or sensitive sites, historic and cultural sites or other factors. So those are generally intended for very limited uses, whereas special districts may have certain types of uses that are allowed. So, and this is in compliance, or I guess consistent with the 2002 general plan goal to be stewards of the trust lands and all the resources available on those lands. Okay, so next slide, please. Okay, so just zooming out for a minute, that was an overview of the current land use designations that are in use by DHHL. And now I want to introduce a few different ways of thinking about land use that we might be able to borrow from or adapt in thinking about how DHHL categorizes its lands going forward. And you know, we'll put the current designations in context when we do that as well. But let's start with the Ahupua'a and VOW model. And I'm going to keep it very high level, but there's a lot of information and material out there about these types of approaches. So the, you know, as many of you probably know, the Ahupua'a model is really based on looking at the resources and the environment of the land and determining what areas are appropriate for different kinds of uses. And it's actually not too different in some ways from the modern concept of zoning, where you look at, you know, the appropriate uses for different kinds of areas. So you can see on the right, there's different zones based on the types of resources that exist, and the uses for those zones are identified. So like the Mauka Forest Zone, the Vaunahele, is limited use, and the area of habitation is more in the middle. It's not along the coast. The coastal areas are reserved for areas like fish ponds and heiau and basically resource use. And you know, this is actually very responsive to the types of environmental features and, you know, hazards that exist. So there's, you know, the coastal areas might flood or, you know, have different impacts. So not locating settlements in those areas is being responsive to the natural environment. So keep these two different models in mind as we think about going forward, how to apply this thinking to DHHL lands and thinking about the resources and the different ways that people can use them. Okay, next slide, please. All right, now this is a slide about Euclidean zoning, and this is actually the basis for DHHL's current land use designations and much of the zoning across the United States. And it was really the dominant model for zoning up until the 20th century, and now there's some new ideas that have been introduced, which we'll get into, but Euclidean zoning is really intended to make sure that there's not incompatible uses right next to each other. So like a big factory next to a school or a residential area, for example. So it's really focused on separating land uses according to their category. And on the right, there's a DHHL land use plan. It has an area for residential. It has an area for subsistence agriculture. The areas for community use and commercial are kind of in their own off to one corner. And you know, there's advantages to this for sure in terms of making sure that residential communities are quiet and healthy, but it also can perpetuate some things that, you know, are not totally sustainable, such as, you know, you have to drive everywhere to get to where you're going to work or play. You don't have a lot of opportunities for having businesses within walking distance of your home. So, and you know, as many of us who live in town know, that can be really convenient and help you get exercise and connect with your neighbors. So, yeah, so I think that's all I'm going to say about that one. Let's go to the next one. Oh, is there a question? I see, Pat, you have your hand up.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's just based on your representation in putting this, helping to put the DHHL to put this general plan in motion, or at least have it corrected for in the future. My question is this right now, because the classic example is my community. That word you use, sorry, Euclidean zoning. Mm-hmm. Okay. What happens? How do we correct a situation that exists now? Now, we have the Hilo Airport. How do you correct it?
Yeah.
Now I know it's not up to this body. Excuse me, the consultant. But that's a question. You see, if we're going to talk about everything, the mission and the vision, I want that question also. And it goes to you, Andy, if you have the opportunity, Andrew, you know, because we got to raise those questions. We cannot look at something down the future and say, this is how it should be, and ignore the fact that for the last 40 years or longer, since the act, that an airport was built and it got expanded using the lands, you know, did the whole 9 yards. And 40 years from now, we're still talking about it because it hasn't been resolved. So I have a hard time participating in things that if we only, I always want to look at the history, because the history makes it so that we try not to fall into that category again. So that's my reason, but that was only based on your representation of what zoning that you know, the DHHL may want to apply now.
Sure.
I think, I think Uncle Pat, you raise a good point about zoning and how it, in the past, it hasn't been compatible with the department's land use, in particular Keaukaha. I think through this general plan, you know, we can articulate what our land uses are, but you raise a good point. We also have to articulate what our land uses are to the counties, to surrounding landowners, so that they're aware of what we intend to put on our lands, and we articulate to them what the department and the beneficiaries would like to see on the land, so that they can adjust to what we are proposing. And I think it works both ways too. We have to take into consideration what is existing currently next to Hawaiian homelands. So while we have control over our lands, we need to be better able to communicate our land uses to the counties and to the surrounding landowners. I think in Keaukaha, it's a totally different situation where the department put homestead there first in Keaukaha, and then the surrounding the surrounding areas didn't respond to what, or didn't take into consideration, and in those cases ignored the department's land uses. So I think the general plan, while it's not going to solve everything overnight, I think it provides an opportunity for the department to more clearly articulate what its land uses, what its land uses are, and provides us with a better tool to advocate to the counties and to surrounding landowners about what we intend to put on our lands, so that they can be more, I can't think of a word right now, but more considerate of what we are proposing, so that what they're proposing is more compatible with what we're wanting to do in our lands.
Yeah, I, by no stretch of the imagination, Andrew, will put words into your mouth, you know, when you can't find the description to it. So use my words. There's something somebody should ask you about it. It is my words that I wanted to be clear, because we are having a problem now, and especially when I'm hearing a representation now by your consultants that's trying to work through these plans, that some of the implementations of the mission and the vision that Hawaiian Home has, it is not we should tell them. They should know when we tell them, not with no stipulations. I just have a problem if it says, if the county for the last 40 years since I've been involved in it, to say we have no control over your zoning. And when you don't have zoning, you don't have land use. If you don't have that power to do that, then why are we in situations now? I know why, but I mean, but how did we get into those situations where there is a big disconnect between a homestead and a subdivision now? You know, DCCRs and all of those things that come into. So there's a big disconnect. And the disconnect is just that. I grew up on a homestead in Kyoka, and many people grew up on their homestead in Papakolea, wherever it was. But there were only two in the 20s, Molokai and Kyoka, and it was a homestead. When I was around in the 40s, the homestead was just that. You rehabilitated yourself by being self-sufficient, take care, raise your pig, do your thing, share with the neighbor. I understand the demographics now have changed, that people don't like your neighbor have one pig in the yard. Well, hello, you know, you came to a community that had that. Now we're trying to say you can't have that. Culturally, you can't have an emu, you know, because the fire gonna come. You're gonna jam up the neighbors' clothes on the line. But all of those things are being threatened moving forward in the land use that someone had a lease, you know, 55 was some right now at the 99-year lease already is ready to expire. So I just need to, you know, I just want to keep it real, but Andrew, I applaud the work that you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. There's definitely a lot, you know, that will go into thinking about how these designations are put into practice. And, you know, we're kind of starting from a big picture. What are the possibilities? And, you know, like we mentioned before, like it has to go through a vetting process in terms of how is it going to work and how is it going to interact with existing communities, as well as the county and the other agencies that DHHL has to coordinate with. So appreciate you bringing that up. I want to cover one more way of thinking about land use and some tools just to add to your ideas about the toolbox that's available. So let's go to the next slide. We will have more discussion on this afterward. So one more main way of thinking about land use, in addition to the two we've talked about, we looked at the Ahupua'a and we looked at the Euclidean zoning. And so one way that's becoming more popular is the form-based way, form-based code. So rather than just focusing on use, like residential versus commercial, it's more focused on form and the transitions between areas that are natural and areas that are developed. So you can kind of see on the bottom, this is like it's called a transect, where, you know, you go from Mauka areas to the developed areas in the middle and then the shoreline. So in some ways it resembles that VOW Ahupua'a model that we looked at before. And it doesn't necessarily restrict the uses in each of these areas the same way Euclidean zoning would. It allows them to be mixed more, but because it dictates form, it's going to naturally limit what can go in those areas to some level. So, you know, in the urban areas, you'll probably have higher density residential and commercial mixed together. And you'll have smaller scale in the, you know, kind of more rural areas. So because it allows a more mixed use environment, it's a little bit better in terms of walkability, and it's also really supportive of community character. So if you want to make a community based on, you know, your desired vision for it and the character of it, then form-based code is a good tool to use to make sure that new development fits that vision. And Kauai County is one that's particularly moving toward this, using it in their zoning code, but other places in Hawaii are using it as well. Okay, so feel free to, you know, if you have any questions on these, we can cover that later, but let's move on to the next one. And this is just another tool, especially for like new homestead communities or considering add-ons to existing ones. thinking about the vision for a community and what you want that to look like, you can use a tool called place types. So if you want it to be a more rural village versus a small town or a large town, this is a tool that's often used in form-based code to determine how you can then apply the different kinds of designations and transects to that. Next slide, please. And then finally, you know, for those areas that need more special treatment, you can use special areas or overlay zones. We talked about the special district and conservation zones before, which is the current designations. You can see on the left here that in the Hanapepe Homestead project that SSFM worked on, we had areas in the site that were deep gulches and with steep slopes. And so we had these overlays of areas that had 20% or more slope and that, you know, you couldn't really build homes on, and they had important functions like drainage. So you can see how we overlaid those designations. And then on the right, you can see the state's sea level rise model. And so that's something that we'll be looking at as part of this plan. It wasn't really on the radar back in 2002. So we'll be looking at climate change and sea level rise and thinking about ways how that might interact with DHHL lands also. So you could apply an overlay to areas that are expected to be affected by sea level rise. Okay, next slide. So that's just kind of a quick primer and some ideas to get you thinking, but we really want to move to hearing what your thoughts on this. We've got about 25 minutes left in the meeting, and I'd like to spend pretty much almost all of that discussing with you guys in small groups. We want to hear, you know, if you have any feedback on these different ways of thinking about land use, and if any of them resonate with you, or either instead of or in addition to the current model. We also just want to hear generally, what land uses would you like to see on Hawaiian homelands over the next 20 years? You know, we want to make sure that any designations that DHHL uses will cover those and include them. And then thinking about different kinds of places like, you know, steep mountains or coastal areas. Are there particular uses that you think are appropriate in different kinds of locations? And any personal input you can give us about how you connect with the land and how you'd like to personally do that. So that's what we're going to be talking about in our breakout groups. I'll leave the next few slides for those breakout group facilitators to go through. So do we have a slide that shows how to get in the breakout groups, Malachi?
I just wanted to add, I think on Thursday evening when we did the breakout groups, a couple beneficiaries had technical difficulties going into the breakout room. Some of them, I think, got disconnected to the meeting. So when they tried to jump back in, they got the meeting in the waiting room or meeting in the lobby. So
yeah.
So if anyone gets disconnected, the waiting room is turned off, and you should go to the, you'll be put back into the meeting. But I'll keep an eye on the breakout rooms, and anyone that's lost, I'll just assign you to a room. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on the breakout rooms, and you'll see a pop-up here that says I'm inviting you to join whatever room number, and then you'll need to click join, and that's how you do it. And I'll be able to see, you know, if anyone's hanging out in the lobby, you know, and unable to join, I'll probably just place you in there. I'll see what I can. I think I can do that, but if not, you can always send us a chat, and we'll see if we can help you out. So let's start the breakout rooms and have our discussions there. Okay. Thanks everybody for taking part in that and sticking with us. Looks like we're all getting back. And I just wanted to bring us home. We had a really good discussion in our group. I'm sure everyone else did too. And
We are recording everybody's input from those groups. I'd say in general, you know, both this meeting and the last meeting, the main thing that we've heard is that, you know, every island is really different. And so with land use, there's no one set of uses that is appropriate, you know, that, but that the whatever land use system exists needs to be flexible enough to allow different islands to, you know, have a big enough toolbox for the different islands to work with, and that those islands can work on that on their own level. And we also heard things about infrastructure being a really important consideration. So thank you all for that, and we're going to be writing up everyone's input, and I just wanted to cover a couple last slides before we close out for today. So we might just be 1 or 2 minutes over. I apologize for that. Let's see, Malachi, where are we at on this slideshow? We just go to the wrap up section.
Okay, hold on, sorry.
No problem. Okay, great. So just a reminder, we've talked a lot about the online open house, and I hope you all go check it out, because the questions that we discussed in our breakout groups are up there for you to add more ideas to. The vision is up there, and some other information. If you didn't make it to the first round of meetings, you'll be able to see a timeline of the DHHL history and our evaluation of the 2002 general plan and how what's happened since then. So there's a lot up there. It's open through April 30th, and we'll be taking all the input from that as well as these meetings as we go forward in the process. Next slide, please. And then this is just the contacts for both me and Andrew, and you can always reach out to us directly with any feedback or ideas or your comments, and we'll make sure they get into the record. So yeah, take a photo of that. This is also up on the website. Next slide, please. Oh yeah, and I just want to say mahalo, and that's it for today. Thanks for all of your time. It's really amazing that, you know, several of you have come to more than one of these meetings, and it's a big commitment and really shows that, you know, you guys are invested in the future. So we'll be looking forward to coming back again and talking about the policies in this plan so that we can, like Uncle Pat said, get it done, make some change happen. So thank you all. I hope you have a great day and the rest of your week, and we'll look forward to seeing you again. We have one more meeting coming up later this week, which is listed on the website in case you want to come back for one more round. Okay, aloha, and thank you.
Aloha. Aloha.
Hui ho.
Hui ho.
If you guys are able to turn on your video, because we're a small group, or so we can see and hear each other. So we're going to be talking about, let me share my screen. We're going to be talking about the series of questions that I showed on the slide. And starting with, did you guys have any feedback on the different kinds of ways of thinking about land use that we talked about? So, you know, the Ahupua'a model, the Euclidean zoning, the form-based code, or just other ideas in general. If we're thinking about DHHL land use going into the future, how would you like us to think about that, you know, in this exercise? Oops. Would anyone like to start? Some thoughts? I can always call on people.
Aloha, this is Cora. This is my second go around. So
Cora.
On the first go around, I actually made a comment that for the other islands, because when we look at the bigger picture, and we're looking at making some manao, bringing up some manao for other islands, it was difficult for me to say what the land base should look like for the other places, because they might have different needs. So it was difficult for me to even comment. My suggestion was that you needed to take it to the different islands and maybe bring it together after you spoke to all the different islands to what their general plan would look like. It was difficult for me to make decision on, say, the Big Island, because anyway, I can only speak of what I thought might work for maybe Molokai, Lanai, and Hana, maybe, even then I don't want to speak for them, but I would say the Ahapua'a would work. I would say can you put up those choices again? I thought the Ahapua'a would be great because they're still raw.
Can you see my screen now or no? This slide.
Let me see if I slide my stuff over. Oh yeah, okay. I thought I thought a little of everything could work, because the lands are still raw. I wouldn't be able to speak about Honolulu. I mean, you guys don't even have room to do all those things unless there's land on the North Shore. But see, it was difficult. But one thing that I thought that Honolulu could maybe is include some sort of subsistent ag area in their 1 acre zoning. I thought that was important for them to be able to do subsistence.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'll give everyone a chance. Thank you.
Thank you, Cora. We definitely heard a lot about that in other meetings. How about you? It says Kainoa, but I don't know if that's, are you Kainoa?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, you did. You got it. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm a Maui beneficiary. I'm living in San Antonio, Texas right now. But I do agree with Cora, in that I think all of the different types of land use, could inevitably be incorporated. But again, this is, I think, just the general plan itself. And then when you kind of got to dig down further, then you have these island plans, that are specific for Maui, and then, Molokai. And we're, just kind of like what Uncle Pat said, we have all of this back past history, one of which is, like the Kuhio Land Awards, if we're going to go 20 years more, I mean, what could we revisit, the way that some of the old style of, land use planning was actually, allocated. So, and then looking at all the different types of land use, I mean, is there infrastructure, right? Because I think that's always the huge issue. We're running, we run the issue with places like Kahiki Nui, Molokai, I know for sure is running into those issues of infrastructure. I think those are maybe the first types of questions that, before you look at the overall land use, you really have to look at whether there's proper infrastructure to support, homestead, So I agree with Auntie Cora, that it really is dependent on the island plan versus the overall general plan.
Thank you. That's very much what we've heard so far.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, go ahead.
Aloha, aloha. This is Nami from Waimanalo.
Nice to meet
And
you.
yes, I am a beneficiary of this wonderful DHHL out here. And, my biggest concern has always been, I understand all the plan. We always have to go backwards to go forward. It appears, that we're redoing same issue, and it hasn't actually manifested much of anything, where I think my biggest concern has always been the 5% residential. That has always been my concern because our waiting list is so long on every island, and we're 100 years, 99 years in our future, and we're just 5%. And that in itself, it disturbs me. Land use is an issue, and there's a lot of land out there I feel that we have to relook at to see how we can utilize some of that for residential. We on Oahu are not pastoral, we're not agriculture, we're not any of that. We don't have it here on Oahu. We're residential. We're primarily residential. And yes, you are correct. Both of you, Cora and Kainoa, God bless you both. I think you've been here before. And I can tell you've been here many times before. I'm new at this. So educating myself is important, not just for myself, but for the future, because we're all concerned about the waiting list. We're all concerned about the waiting list. And it is a hodgepodge of many issues that they've been waiting for a long time, those that sit on the waiting list. And the longer they wait there, the more drastic it is to own a home, because we see it on Oahu. There's no really affordable homes. Even Department of Hawaiian Homelands don't have affordable homes. And it comes with a lot of, guidelines, lots of that. So yes, I'm here to educate myself. I really know I want to know what's happening with the Department of Hawaiian Home and the Department of Hawaiian Home Commission, and listening to Uncle Pat, it enlightens me. It does enlighten me. And kudos to yourself, Melissa, and Jared, and all of you who take up this torch for us Hawaiians, but we've got to do more. There's got to be a way to do more so that we can bring that waiting list down. Yeah. So I mahalo all of you. Aloha for taking the time, and I'll keep on top of it. I'll be at every meeting there has to be. Zoom is the best way to go. Zoom is the best way to go. Mahalo, mahalo.
Excellent. Thank you, Nami. Yeah, it makes it a lot easier for everyone to get together and hear from each other. So how about we've got Sharonette and Richard. Would anyone like to add anything to what we've heard so far? Maybe not. Okay.
I also, can I
Sure.
add something?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think, it comes down to the bureaucracy of things, so you can have this perfect land use plan, and I'm just like kind of like lay out an example. I would put my kind of like my eggs in the basket if you had like a Julie and an Andrew spearheading that land use plan, right? But you don't. You have 9 other commissioners from all these different islands that really have to come to a consensus to vote, right? So you really have to ensure that from an island perspective, like on Maui, we are blessed because we have our Maui Mokupuni Council, and we're totally always engaged with our commissioner, Randy Awo, and so we're blessed for that. But at the same time, that's not the case for like Honolulu, right? Or maybe Kauai. That it becomes a consensus, at the tail end of that, like I said, if we're sitting here and we're saying, Andrew, this is what we want on Maui, would you be able to put that realization into our land use conception? And that would be like, yes, go for all 4. But that's not generally the case. So I think that's why there's that the big question mark, of trying to merge past, present, and the future, because you have this consensus issue which arises, as we all know, on the DHHL level, so that I think is the big issue. So to have a framework is great, but moving forward, how do all 9 on the commission vote for the same thing?
It's a good point to bring up. Yeah.
This is Cora again.
Cora.
I wanted to somewhat piggyback on Kai's info with a little twist. I wanted to share that several things. The leases that already went out, because looking at your prior handouts in other meetings, there isn't that much land use available per each island. And when you look at the comparison, how long the wait list is, then there's not enough land to go around with all these people on the wait list. So my question is, what is the inventory on the non-Hawaiian leases? And how do you guys go by getting those leases back for our people on the wait list? That's one. Number two is, why not even award these different waitlisters in anticipation on where the areas that are available for, whether it's residential, agriculture, whatever it is, and then let these people meet as a group, because now they're invested. So they now can come out with a development of what their community should look like and be developed. Because the way things are is sort of backwards. It's like we waiting. In this case, the beneficiary is on the front end of it, and they are willing now, they're invested because they have been called on potential land that is available. And guess what? They get to work along with you folks now because they have an investment. In this case, it's not working. How many times are you guys doing this? It's an indicator it's not working. Why don't you do something differently? So that is my propose up front. And looking at this land use is these people that could potentially be part of, you folks would be, you guys would have better buy-in, and it will be more productive, because it's like we're guessing what it should look like for other people's best interest. It can happen that way. So I'm proposing that you folks may look at this whole process and do a little tweaking a little bit, because one, if your goal is to get people off the wait list, you can hit a lot of birds with one stone. And it starts with the planning of the general plan, and you have to do it a little differently. We've gone through this road, I don't know how many times, but that's my mana'o. That's my mana'o. Mahalo.
Thank you. Andrew, has there been any, effort or thought about kind of doing that advanced planning in that way, or do you have any experience with that?
So I think, and Cora, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what Cora is referring to is we have done undivided interest awards in the past, where we gave out leases to those on the wait list for a particular area, so that they would be invested in the development of that particular area. But what we haven't done is involve those lessees in the actual planning of the area. So I think what Cora is talking about is would advance that thought about involving those on the wait list, and not just involving, but investing those on the wait list in a particular area. So I think that's a good idea, and I think
Absolutely.
that's something that we will take a look at in our Kuleana homestead planning communities in the future. So
I think, Andrew, and it's the only reason I mentioned, we got great examples here. In 1990, you folks did an acceleration program with the waitlisters that was in the 1990s, or it was anyway. But back then you did an acceleration. I think you guys' efforts was awesome in that year. But what happened is it was forgotten. Somehow it went and then it got dropped. But if it was thought out thoroughly, you guys would have gotten things done in a much quicker process, because because you know what, the beneficiary part of the policies is that you need beneficiaries involvement in these type of development, and they would be working hand in hand with one of the sign planner, and it would be moving, and so it wouldn't be boom, it wouldn't be cut. You know, it's like you go and then boom, it falls between the cracks. In this case, if in the future we can move forward in doing something like this, you would get people excited. You would bring back the beneficiaries, because up to now, a lot of our beneficiaries don't have trust with DHHL, and we're trying to reestablish the rapport with other beneficiaries to come back to the table and have talk story. And so I think you hit it right on the head. Sorry, I'll let you guys go. Thank you, Andrew.
Oh, it's okay.
Thank you, Cora.
Thanks, Cora. We're going to be closing in about 50 seconds, but anyone have any additional thoughts that you'd like to share for this consideration?
Anybody else? Well, really quick too. Oh, go ahead.
I know, go ahead. You're good.
I think it's just infrastructure, because that's really what's happening. I work with the undivided VCs on the wait list currently, and we have a number that are on some of the Waiahuli and Keokea area, and they're running into some major infrastructure. I'm talking plumbing, access to water, so to get the land, again, it's ensuring that there is proper infrastructure so that the beneficiary can thrive.
Great.
Hi, everyone. So I'm going to share my screen here. We're just going to try to answer the questions that Melissa brought up earlier. Okay, so the first one is all the land uses, the ways that thinking about land uses that Melissa brought up earlier, which is the traditional cultural land use concepts such as the ahupua'a or the Euclidean Zoning or the form-based codes. We just want to know how relevant are each of these in the ways that you think about land use for your vision of Hawaiian homelands. Do you guys have any thoughts about any of that? Okay, Pat, you can unmute yourself and answer. Hands up. Yeah. Go ahead.
Just based on that, a portion of the question was about the ahupua'a style or a vision. Right now, in my opinion, the only place that the ahupua'a style of homestead is on the island of Molokai, where they go. The ahupua'a style, in my understanding, and anybody out there correct me if I'm wrong, but growing up was that ahupua'a was from the mountain to the sea. You took care and you gathered and you did everything inside one ahupua'a without being nearly in somebody else's. So I cannot see how in the idea or the concepts are great, but sometimes I think the language being used in this type of setting, that it's an ahupua'a style, it becomes it sends a connotation that we have access to the mountain and the sea from within the Ahwa that I'm in. I'm in the Ahwa Waiakea, and so it is. There is a portion that the DHHL, their lands abut from the forest reserve to the ocean, but get plenty pilikia in between. I for one have this great consternation as to Hawaiian Homes starts here on Kanoilehua, but before it reaches Railroad Avenue, everything in between is gone. Go to somebody else and then jump back to Hawaiian Home again. So it's going to be a daunting question, Matt, to continue to ask, but it's something that's got to be done. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Okopa. That's a good good input that you're providing to us on that concept. Does anyone else in this room have any thoughts of any of these ways to think about land uses? You can either type it in or you can unmute yourself and ask your question. Okay. How about we go into the next question that we're asking? Let's see. Okay. So the next one is, these are just some examples to just see the conversation, and this is pretty open-ended. We want to see what land uses would you like to see on Hawaiian homelands over the next 20 years. So these are some of the things listed here that, just to bring up some ideas, but we just want to hear your thoughts of what kind of land uses. For example, like what kind of housing types you want to see, or community spaces do you like to see on Hawaiian homelands as well? So does anyone want to provide any input on that? You guys see my screen? Hey, Dwight, you have something to say?
Yeah, I'd like to see more small-scale agriculture on Hawaiian homelands. And so in that section, you talked about small-scale ag less than 5 acres. I think you could even go smaller than 5 acres in the range of 2 to 3 acres.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it fulfills the mission of food sustainability, which I don't see much of.
It's a good input, Dwight. Is there anything else that you would like to see on Hawaiian homelands in regards to that, or any of these other things listed here?
No, I think looks like of all the lists in there,
Mm-hmm.
the places to grow food is the one that's the least fulfilled.
Mm. Okay, great. Let's see. Does anyone else have any input on this question? What land uses would like to see in Hawaiian homelands? Thanks, Dwight, for the input, by the way.
Excuse me, Matt.
Yeah, go ahead, Pat. Yeah.
Some of the land uses that it's hard to make these kinds of statements, but I don't have a problem to do it because I was taught the only time you got to worry about what you say is if you lie. So trust me, it's not a lie when I tell you how does the Department of Hawaiian Homes or the commission correct not the inequities, I believe, to those on the wait list, but what happens to those lands that were awarded 30, 40 years ago and they never went on the land? People never came to the land, sold some of those vacant lands. How do we now go forward and say, well, hey, what's the best use of the land? The best use of the land was to give the person, if he didn't want it, give it back to Hawaiian Home and move on with that process. But it's how do we now say to the future or to those on the wait list? We've got 500 acres, but we cannot award it because it was already awarded 30 years ago.
Right.
So we need some continuity there.
It's a bad. That's a good comment too. Let me go to the next question.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Paulette.
Is because I'm new to this process. Is there any type of sustainable energy on Hawaiian homes that can benefit the Hawaiians that are on certain homesteads?
Sorry, Paulette.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Paulette. You got kind of cut off on my side. Could you repeat that real quick?
Sure. Let me see if I can remember. On Hawaiian homesteads that are occupied presently, is there any type of consideration for sustainable energy to benefit those homesteaders? And well, that's good enough.
Right now, I can't think of one right now, but I guess, is that something that's
Is there a possibility that this could benefit those that are there?
Yeah, I think that's could be one of the land uses that if you want to see. Is that something that you want to see on Hawaiian homelands?
Well, I would like to see where, like sustainable energy, like in solar energy, and what if we can use some of that Hawaiian homestead area, the Aina around where the homesteaders do currently live, if that can be used for sustainable energy, solar, wind, but in retrospect, all that revenue can benefit those homesteaders in that specific area and the surrounding homesteads. It's just a thought.
Right. Yeah, I think that's something. That's some good input that we can take back to see that. That would be a benefit that we're trying to see what type of land uses that beneficiaries want to see, and we want to see things that benefit them. So that's a good one also that we can bring back. The use of these homelands for, I guess, renewable energy development also.
Yes, and also when you do share that, where the current homesteaders are beneficial to this to all that energy.
Right. Great. Thanks, Paulette. Is there anything else you want to add to that?
I have several, but this is good for a starter.
Okay, thank you. Let's get back to one of the other questions. So, like they mentioned, there's certain types of homelands that are not able to use for homesteads, probably just mostly because of the geography of the area and the constraints that they have. So, I guess for these certain types of land uses, what do you think are most appropriate in these certain type of spaces? we have some coastal areas, some areas with high cliffs and malka areas, some gulches and streams. Do you guys have any input on what type of land uses would be most appropriate for these certain types of areas? And I guess if you want to chime in also, the last question would be, how would you like to Malama and connect with the Aina and Hawaiian homelands? So if you guys have any input on any of this, please unmute yourself and chime in. Or I guess the way to think about it is like, what other ways can these types of lands benefit the beneficiary communities? So for the lands that are in malka areas, how can it benefit you, or for these other areas as well? You guys have any input on that? Go ahead and unmute Dwight. And
okay.
Yeah, go ahead. Oh, Dwight, you're muted again.
So the same statement I made about the agricultural land, I think the tendency on state ag has been to allow sustainable energy to use low-grade agricultural land. I think that's turning out to be a big mistake. DHHL should avoid that mistake. Ag land is at a premium on most islands, and there are more people that are wanting to farm but have no access to land. So I think, again, trying to find acreage that can be set up for sustainable farming and allowing more people to access small farming lots would be a benefit to DHHL as well as the state of Hawaii.
Great. Thanks, Dwight, for that. I took down your comment on that one. Go ahead, Uncle Pat.
And then I'd like to just echo what was said there, because ag is an important part now. It has always been for us, even from the ancient time. That's what made us survive in the middle of the ocean, our ancestors anyway. And then it allowed me growing up to have the same opportunity to do that. My thing about there's several portions inside of the act that we feel, or the department, or again, all those governments that had the opportunity to take care of it. And one was a community pasture. There's only one now in existence, and that's on Molokai, a community pasture that's particularly addressed in the Hawaiian Home Commission Act in 211, I think it is. However, there was one on the Big Island in Waimea that was taken away to make 10-acre ag lots that are not fully developed 30 years down the road. It hasn't even come to fruition where everybody became 10-acre ranchers. So if there's agricultural things that maybe we should create an agricultural park instead of the community pasture. But those are great ideas. But we're gonna be stymied with, hey, we don't have enough money. No, we cannot do this. We cannot do that. So it behooves us as beneficiaries to become, assert your rights to those lands, uses of those lands that are there, and the department just needs to come along with us as a friend or somebody. So, thank you.
Great. Thanks, Pat, for that.
Yeah.
Also, yeah. It looks like we have about 40 seconds left. Is there any other thoughts from any of you? Any additional thoughts or any thoughts that no one brought up yet that you would like to bring up real quick?
Mahalo.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mahalo, Matt.
Thank you, Paulette.